Welcome to BWC News. I am Elizabeth. On Friday local time, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that the only and best solution to the current U.S. debt impasse is for Congress to agree to raise the debt ceiling. During the day, the meeting of Group of 7 finance ministers and central bank governors in Niigata, Japan, entered its second day. Yellen told the press on the sidelines of the meeting that global markets, American families, and businesses need to see a U.S. Congress that is committed to paying its bills. Since last year, U.S. lawmakers and government officials from both parties have been arguing about raising the debt ceiling. In January, the U.S. Treasury announced the start of so-called special measures to manage the government's cash flow through the spring as the federal debt was hitting the $31.4 trillion legal limit on borrowing. The U.S. Congress sets a cap on government debt, and once that cap is hit, lawmakers must raise the debt ceiling or suspend it before the Treasury can afford to issue more bonds to pay bills as they come due. And if the government is unable to issue bonds to help pay its bills, it will have to suspend some pension payments, withhold or cut pay for military and federal workers, or delay interest payments, constituting a default. Earlier, Yellen told Congress that the Treasury could run out of money at some point in June. She said she is not sure exactly when the Treasury will run out of money, but as we get closer to that date, I may be able to provide more precise guidance to Congress. On the financial markets, investors could lose confidence in U.S. Treasuries, triggering a massive sell-off and causing financial chaos, accompanied by a possible government shutdown due to federal employee pay cuts that could hurt the economy. Yellen also reiterated her view that a default would be an economic and financial disaster. She also revealed that she spoke with business executives in recent days. Wall Street executives and American business people have repeatedly talked about their concerns about the debt ceiling, and we want to hear from those who may be affected by this. The current situation is that President Joe Biden and congressional Democrats are calling on Republicans to agree to raise the debt ceiling without conditions. But Republicans, for their part, say they will not agree to raise the debt ceiling without cutting federal spending. However, at this critical moment, President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy postponed talks on the debt ceiling that were scheduled to take place this Friday. Nevertheless, their aides are continuing negotiations to avoid a catastrophic U.S. debt default. The postponement suggests progress has been made in staff-level talks on energy licensing reform and government spending, according to people familiar with the matter. Biden and McCarthy plan to meet with congressional leaders next week, but neither side has given a specific date. McCarthy told reporters at the Capitol that the delay in the next round of talks on the debt ceiling does not mean the negotiations have broken down. He said congressional leaders agreed that there would be more fruitful discussions for staff to continue. White House Congressional Liaison Louisa Terrell met with McCarthy Chief of Staff Dan Meyer and other aides for more than 2 hours of closed-door talks Thursday afternoon local time. While both sides said progress was made in private talks, McCarthy again harshly criticized Democrats in an effort to appease conservatives in the Republican Party who are calling for deep cuts to the government budget. President Biden and Senator Schumer keep saying, no, they don't have a plan, they don't have a proposal to cut, and they don't have a clue. McCarthy told reporters after news of the delayed talks broke. He said, it's clear that President Biden doesn't want a deal. He wants the United States to default. The clock is now ticking on the time left for members of Congress to reach a deal, with the day of debt default looming ever closer. Louisiana Republican Representative Garrett Graves said the focus of negotiations on spending also includes recovering unused funds related to the new Crown epidemic and limiting spending for the next federal fiscal year, which begins October 1st. He added that the White House side wants a short-term cap deal, while Republicans want to limit discretionary government spending over a 10-year period. In response, Yellen, a Democrat, said that if Congress ultimately fails to raise the debt ceiling, it could hurt the U.S. credit rating. She warned yesterday that a debt default would be disastrous for both the domestic and international economic systems, and that the U.S. should never default. After X date, tens of billions of dollars in social welfare payments may be in jeopardy and the U.S. government may have to shut down. The Bipartisan Policy Center, a think tank that specializes in predicting when the U.S. government will officially fail to pay its bills, said Tuesday that the big day for a debt default could occur between early June and early August. Between early June and early August. By that time, about $50 billion in Social Security benefits will have been paid in the first half of June. At the same time, Medicaid, the federal Medicaid program that provides health care to low-income people, will need to make more than $20 billion in payments to providers, with $6 billion in federal employee salaries, $12 billion in veterans benefits and $1 billion in food rolls waiting to be paid out. To ensure that the U.S. debt does not default for now, all of these payments of a social welfare nature could be in jeopardy after the X date. The Biden administration has already rejected proposals to delay payment of some of these bills as unfair to ordinary Americans, causing widespread economic disruption and logistically impossible to achieve in practice. The BPC says the more likely scenario is that the Treasury will choose to delay payment of all bills. As of March, about 52 million retirees were receiving Social Security benefits. However, Wendy Adelberg, a senior economic fellow at the Brookings Institution, noted that if the Treasury decides to continue paying interest on the national debt, other spending would need to be cut by about 25%. If the Treasury also continues to pay Social Security, the hit to other spending obligations could be as much as about one-third. In addition, the Treasury cannot unilaterally decide which payments to defer without authorization from Congress. Such an approach could face legal challenges. Another possibility is that non-core departments of the U.S. federal government would have to opt for a temporary shutdown. In 2013, when faced with the issue of hitting the U.S. debt ceiling, the impasse in negotiations forced the U.S. government to shut down for more than 2 weeks in October of that year. This resulted in more than 800,000 federal employees being forced to take furloughs and led to the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, as well as huge economic losses. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Dimon on Thursday highlighted the dangers of approaching the X date. The risk of a potential debt default could cause people to panic and make unreasonable decisions, which could cause significant stock market volatility and possibly lead to rapid changes in the price of treasuries. The situation is becoming increasingly unpredictable as the U.S. Treasury approaches the X date of running out of cash. While the U.S. debt is facing default, many countries are now also increasing their efforts to sell off U.S. debt. It is reported that some time ago, at least 16 countries, including China and Japan, have sold U.S. debt. China is the most active country in the recent sell-off of U.S. debt, reducing its holdings for 7 consecutive months, and has now reduced by about 36%. This phenomenon is undoubtedly adding insult to injury for the United States. For this reason, both Yellen and Blinken are very eager to visit China. These 2 days, Blinken is shouting at the Chinese side to treat U.S. companies fairly. He said that the treatment of U.S. companies in China and other companies is not equal. If the U.S. can't turn back, the future will only be more miserable.